Hello, nerds and skaters. Welcome to my Pigcast of EU4, where the idea is just like people have been have been nagging me for EU4 MP content for a long time now. And yeah, it's, this here. No, I did just to put it in media. All right, media. Anyway, I'm just gonna talk about the Dev Diary that came out today with the new Dev Diary style, where a lot comes out every month. And I'm gonna talk about the main changes of the Dev Diary. We're not gonna skim through every single one. There's a lot of like little irrelevant changes. I'm talking, of course, about the perspective from an MP player, someone who plays exclusively in 40 plus like MP player groups, where everyone is expected to perform somewhat to their best of their abilities. And so obviously it has a big impact overall on my. I'm gonna move my. Wait, just reduce the size of my window. Okay, there we go. So let's see, and then I'm gonna pop off my chat. Give me 2 seconds, guys, to set up. Only one person watching. Hello, Nico. Very wholesome. It's my most wholesome view. All right, there we go. I've popped you guys out so I can interact with you, nerds live. Okay, so let's go through it. You guys tell me if you see it. Hey, Fuffy. Okay, Fuffy was wholesome viewer now. Whoever writes in chat is the most recently is the most wholesome viewer. So just keep talking to me, East Clap. All right, so there's three big changes to that were announced. There's the rework of state limit, which is the first one we're going to talk about. Then there's a introduction of 3 new buildings to the game, which is like much later here. Blah blah. I hear this stuff, and probably the biggest change, but we'll talk about how much it changes and addresses the issues of an MP of the naval warfare game. The rework of naval warfare thanks to the introduction of the ship disengagement chance modifier. Then there's other like irrelevant changes, like little values here and there to government reforms. I'm not saying that they are good or bad. Yes, I do have my thing. Hey guys, sure. There's also a reaction video. That's right. But I've already read it. Like when I first read the Dev Diary, I was like, oh my god, what is this? This is horrible. This is terrible, blah blah blah. Okay, so I got time to think about it a little bit more, and I will say overall the 3 changes that Paradox made to our game here, they improve. They are going to improve. That's right, you've heard it here first. They are going to improve the base vanilla game. Okay. Now, I didn't say that that I like the concept of the changes, nor that I like the implementation of said concepts, right? But I do think overall they are going to improve the current game that we have. All right, so let's start with the first change, which is the state limit change. All right, I think. What do you mean? I don't talk English. SMH, SMH, SMH. Cool. Agony, Nico being a skater. Everyone was skating in the MP community on this Dev Diary, but here I am, the voice of reason and positivity of always just and wholesomeness overall. All right, so I'm gonna explain to you why it's better. It doesn't mean it's good. It's just better than what we currently have. All right. So instead of trying to put duct tape, we decided to rip out the max state modifier, and that they did. So what do we have instead? The current system is you have a maximum number of states. Once you have this amount of states, any lands that you take is not very valuable for yourself. Okay, I will already rant on this because some players, Cookie, and not just Cookie, like Jones also had this mentality. A lot of players have this mentality that once you're at your state cap, it's no longer interesting for you to take over territory. And this is extremely short-sighted and wrong. the like you take territory in EU4 whenever you can, whenever it's cheap to do so, because at some point you're going to unlock more state limits, a higher state limit, and so you would want to have those lands already. And there's no cost to having, because it's not like you're paying them in corruption, or even if you have that much territory that you're paying corruption for it in MP, it's not significant enough to insensitize. Okay, I can't say that word, but you're getting what I get. Hey, Jar Jar. It's not sufficient to prevent you from deciding to expand at a time that is convenient. So what happens in the game is taking over land is so expensive. Whenever you have an opportunity to do it, you do it. All right, and as well, you don't play the game solo. So if you can weaken a rival or something, it's good. This incentive is, oh my god, like this is not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. It's not. Okay, so now there is an argument against that, which is that if you kill your opponent by waging war against him, and you can only get territories, but on the other hand, other rivals, like 2 or 3 or 4 other rivals, are gonna get a lot of valuable land, and maybe it's not interesting for you to take the land, even when convenient for you to do so. All right. Even when that's the case. Right. But I'd say in general, when you're playing the game, when it's convenient to take land, you take it because you'll benefit to some extent in some way, in some capacity from it at some time. All right. Let's move on. So that's just burying that argument. That's not the reason why states, like, we don't want there to be state limits. So now instead, we don't have a max states. We have a soft cap, which means that whenever you have land, you have the option of stating. Right? You have the option of stating. This is a very big difference, which means that if a country runs out of, keeps expanding and really snowballs, it's going to keep snowballing very efficiently. Right? Of course, the more land you grab, relatively speaking, is less of a difference the bigger you are. But still is going to be very impactful now compared to before. So, right, definitely it's a big buff to out-of-control countries, and it's a big reason to coalition more than before. Whereas before, if you're growing out of control, you don't really want to keep pushing. You just want to sit and consolidate the lands that you have. That much is true. But that's due to different mechanics than the state limit most of the time. Or a combination of mechanics. So what happens now with the soft cap if you exceed it? It appears that you get this modifier, which the way I understand it, and I imagine that you all understand it the same way, is that once you are at double the limit of this number, which is an amount of debt that you can have stated, or an amount of debt that your empire can adequately manage, most of it being coming from stated development, because non-stated development counts for less. If you exceed it, you start getting progressively this mechanic or this modifier, and at double of this number, then it is this bad. This is the modifier, and the way I understand is this is the cap. This is the hard cap. So this is the worst it gets. Right, but they only say going over the limit has a scaling penalty, which at 100% over the limit is. So theoretically, if you interpret this sentence, it could be that at 500% over the limit, it's higher than this. It could be the case, right? But my understanding is that this is the hard cap. Okay, Fluffy says it keeps going. Johan confirmed. Okay, that actually makes a difference. Okay, that actually does make a difference then. But probably not for MP though. Probably not for MP, because I don't think that you're gonna be if you're over 100% of the limit, probably you're not gonna be much higher. Okay, so let's just assume that practically for an MP setting, for a relevant MP game, the one we're talking about, the one we participate in, you're most likely not going to be at 200% or 300%. You're most likely going to be in the range of 1 to 100%. Right? So you're going to be affected by somewhere in between this. So how bad is this modifier? That's the question, right? So this we don't give a shit about. This we don't give a shit about. This we care a little bit about. And this we care a little bit about. We care a little bit about. But I think the answer is quite clear that from an MP perspective, none of these modifiers ever warrant not stating lands that you could state otherwise. So for all intents and purposes, when it comes to MP, you're just going to state everything that you can. Bold prediction right there. So yeah, you're just going to state everything. I mean, I wouldn't we could say that you don't at all care about this. You do care a little bit because in vanilla, unfortunately, if your relations go too sour, you can't ally, which is very bad. Like number one thing that needs to be fixed about vanilla MP. So maybe that actually might have some effect as well. But yeah, obvious prediction, I know, of course. So basically, you're just going to state everything. And this is where I said I don't think this is a good concept. I don't think this is a good implementation, but it's still an improvement on the base vanilla game because states limit in no way is an interesting mechanic or does it meaningfully add to the game. So we just remove state limit and now we have a little malice that some countries are going to live with. It's almost irrelevant. All right. Now let's see what else they added. They gave a little buff to courthouses so that courthouses reduce the local government cost of death, right? So basically, if you stated the province itself with the second tier courthouse is going to have a town hall, I think it's called. One thing is how the base cap for government ranks compared. It's 10, 300, 500. That's a lot lower, isn't it? So the base cap would be a lot lower with a Fluffy. Now I didn't say to remove cancer evades because I do think this is a lot better than what they currently have. All right, it could be low, but the thing is, like I went with at some point, he said besides unique IDs, there is now 20 and 25% in expansion administrative. Quick math, and you should be able to have around 3,500 development fully stated without any issues, right? Without courthouses or town halls. Now that's counting in expansion. No one's going to have expansion. Administrative, less people are going to have administrative in 1.3. Right, it's going to be 8th pick, if at all. That's another bold prediction right there. But so, like, if we think about it, it's going to be like 2,000 something, 2,500, maybe 3,000, right? So, like, you're going to have like 20% staff cost increase, or maybe 30 to 40%, right? For MP, it's moddable. Yeah, that's true. And states are not exactly like fun to mod or anything. You're just gonna add a shit ton to it, I guess, to remove it. So my expectation when I read this number, but of course values can change, is that most countries will not have a big like penalty going for them. Will not have a big penalty. Now, let's talk about these courthouses or town halls. Does this mean that we were going to build courthouses and town halls? The answer is yes and no. The answer still very much remains that you're never going to build a courthouse or a town hall, as in one of the 4 hard slots that every province needs. But of course, we were already building courthouses when we were swapping TCs, level 3s, for getting when we get that extra building slot. So there's a decision whether or not you want to make a fort, a temple, the trade building, or a courthouse. And often the answer was already that you want to make a courthouse. If like you don't need trade province in that, or you don't need trade power in that node, you don't need a fort on that specific province. You don't have the money for it. You don't need a temple on it because it only has 1 or 2 base stacks. In those cases, already you would build the courthouse if you had excess money. Yeah, the new map art. Yeah, but in those cases, you would build the courthouse already. Now you have even more incentive to build the courthouse. Now let's just think about how much incentive is it really, or the new naval battery? No, please no. The new to like this local governing cost. So the short answer is that now the courthouse gives you, right? So in practical terms, the question is: do I now build courthouses on 3 base tax provinces in that 5th or 6th slot if with my TC swapping? But that's like the practical question that this modifier being added to the game makes you ask. And in order to answer that question, we need to figure out sort of the exchange rates of admin mana in this late game to cards. And the way you think about that, the way you calculate that is by thinking, what money am I willing to pay for an advisor, an admin advisor? Okay, hey Sword, how are you doing? Is what money am I willing to pay per mana that the admin advisor gives? That's my exchange rate that I'm willing to pay for admin mana. So that's the worth of admin mana, right? Now, most people say you don't care about admin mana late game, but you do care a little bit about admin mana. The way is most of the time you're swimming in excess mana, but still you want to be like really hitting those timings like very very early, and so you have to be swimming in thing. But there are specific times. I'm gonna slow down my speech a little bit, if that's better or not. There are specific times in the game, even in the late game, where you're not swimming in excess admin mana. For example, you go rev. Once you rev, you don't get excess admin. Instead, you have to stab up a lot of times. There are times where you're getting stab hits, and stab costs could actually be meaningful. There's like aspiration of liberty desire in the late games, like specific timings where you are actually in an admin deficit and the value of admin is quite high. But even then, I think most of the time when you're in the late game, if you have a rich country, you're like running a +4 admin advisor, or you're running a +5 advisor. You're running a +5 advisor if you have the discounted advisor. So that's roughly 16 to 18 ducats that you're willing to spend to get +4 admin mana per month. Right, so we're thinking about 4 to 5 ducats per admin mana per month as like a late game value, like ducats value of admin mana. And if you think about how much this local government cost for 100 costs is going to give you of admin mana, because it affects your stability cost by like every one of these is going to affect your stability cost by like 1% or 0.5%. All right, you're getting where I'm going at. It's not fucking worth much. It's not fucking worth much mana, admin mana. And the cost to ratio to admin mana is terrible. It's much worse than the one that you're getting from your +4 or +5 admin mana than you can afford, that you are willing to afford. So it's not a big buff to courthouses, but there was already room for courthouses. I don't. To give an answer to my own question, which is on provinces that have only 3 base stacks, am I building courthouses now? I don't think so. I think I'm still building temples on those, and everything below that we're building courthouses. Of course, if you have another excess slot, you might as well. All right. So we always state when it comes down to territories, but there's also another change, which is the trade companies. And here there's a real question of, is it ever worth putting a trade company up instead of a state? And I think the answer is yes. Trade companies are still going to remain relevant, though not as relevant as they used to be, obviously. Not as relevant as they used to be. I'm also going to do a little side rant, which is, let's do an ID prediction for Vanilla 1.3. Jarvan is going to be very excited, because I think, looking at all the changes of Vanilla 1.3, that trade is now going to be the default 6th ID. We're going to have quality, eco, quantity, innovative, offensive into trade. Maybe defensive if trade defensive has like a policy synergy, but probably offensive trade, right? And the reason is that, why do we go Diplo? Why do we go administrative? Well, we go Diplo administrative because they give us mercs. And most likely mercs are just going to be terrible, right? So if mercs are terrible, then we want trade. Because trade is better than religious. Alright. So there you go. The other thing about admin that makes it good, of course, is state limit. There's no more states, so fuck that. And then there's interest per annum. That's really good in admin IDs. But trade is better in terms of delaying bankruptcy. Trade is better than administrative with interest per annum. So that's why I'm thinking we're gonna go trade, and I'd say trade is better than religious overall. Why can't I show? What the hell is happening? Another moderator should have. Just more though. Having trade allows you to build more of these manpower manufacturers. Exactly, you're right as well, Jarvin. You're absolutely right. Jarvin is right. So I unironically think that that trade is going to be the sixth, like new policy is going to be trade sixth. Not necessarily every country, right? Because if you have a trader, it's less relevant for you, and so you might still do religious. But imagine not going naval for marines. Actually a source of pseudo mercs, so like not necessarily completely ridiculous. Maritime, maybe maritime eighth, right? Maybe if you have like no trade whatsoever and someone else is handling your trade, you actually do go maritime. I mean, there opens up possibilities. It depends on how bad the mercs are. And I want to say, if anyone from Paradox is watching or ever like stumbles upon this content, you have to make mercs take over modifiers from the base country, because else mercs are just like, we're not putting them in the battle, right? They're just completely useless. Like imagine like most countries in vanilla, they get to like 220 to 230 effective discipline. Like if your mercs have 110 effective discipline, they're useless. They have like 1/4 of the efficiency of other troops, so they can't compete. Okay. Anyway, let's keep going. Trade companies. Trade companies lowered autonomy to 80%. 80%. Holy shit, right? Holy shit. Now, minimum authorities, blah blah blah. The way it works is that trade power and naval force limit are not affected by autonomy when given to a trade company. Right? This is here. It said, blah, blah, blah. I mean, right here. Autonomy trade company, blah. Okay. So, yeah. Now, the question is, what do trade companies do now after this nerf? Because before, trade companies were like kind of super provinces in some sense. Right? But also a bit bad. But what did the old trade companies do when everything was constructed? They gave you like 50% trade, or 50% tax, 50% manpower. They gave you force limits. They gave you like omega trade power. Hello, Trump. And they gave omega trade power, and then they gave you a lot of naval force limit. They gave you insane production income, and they gave you the uber nuts in terms of trade value. So they were very, very good. Like they would give you, like the only bad thing about them was manpower. That's the old or the current version of trade companies. So it's a no-brainer that you put them out them. And not only do they give you really good provinces, but they also gave you like the tier 3 improvements, which gave you land force limit, like per region 5 land force limit, 0.1 army tradition. They were good. Okay. Now 80% local autonomy. How good are they? They will give you no base tax. Well, they will give you a little bit of base tax, or not base tax, tax income, but almost insignificant amount of tax. They'll give you almost insignificant amount of manpower. I say that's very good. They're going to give you an almost insignificant amount of force limit, but still some force limit, like 0.4 force limit if you build up everything in there. And they're going to give you a lot less production, a lot less taxation effect. That's exactly right. A lot less production income. So what are they giving you still? They're giving you still the omega nuts in terms of trade value and the omega nuts in terms of trade power, right? So my view on this change and my bold prediction here is most countries will not be interested in trade in trade companies. They're just gonna state that shit because they want the force limit and they want the production income, the tax income, the manpower income. or the manpower income, the manpower straight up. They want all of this. So everyone is going to state everything except very specific circumstances, right? The one thing is you may want the 0.180, one per region at the very least, right? Because that's still fucking good, right? But besides that, England and Great Britain are still going to want some trade companies in the circumstance being the following, which is that they don't own the entire region. If you own the entire region, for example, a very common scenario is Western Africa. Great Britain owns all of Western Africa. It doesn't need to have a lot of trade power in Western Africa. It already has a lot of trade power in Western Africa. So it can just state all of Western Africa. There's no reason for it not to. Because it's just going to get more money, obviously. It's just going to get more money. It's going to get more force limit. It's going to get more manpower. But in the event that you don't own a significant amount of the trade company region, why trade companies when I can make vassals? Right. And today, but are vassals better than these trade companies? Well, you can't make infinite vassals, and you do get the AT. So I do think that trade companies are still better than the vassals. They are much cheaper than, or they are much more expensive than the vassals. And if you happen to lose the bankrupt, then you lose your investments. So that's why I'm saying very specific, like only Portugal and Great Britain. The reason is that you really want the trade power. Like you want the Omega joke trade power, because the way trade propagation works, you're just going to have like an insane amount of trade power in every trade node, and it's going to increase the amount of trade power that you end up having in your main node, which is then itself going to increase the trade power. And so it's like this, very funny. It's like this horrible snowballing like virtuous cycle of trade power, and that's why you still want the trade companies in like regions where you own only a small part of the region. So let's say you have India, the Coromandel nodes, you only have Madurai, or you only have Sri Lanka. You'd want a trade company that. You'd want a trade company. Very cool hand gesture. Thank you, Susan. I'm trying to be positive. Okay, I'm like again, this is a positive change. Were trade companies in vanilla and be much too strong? Yes. Like if you think about how crazy these things were, like if you think about Great Britain guaranteed to win the naval warfare, but also almost guaranteed, unless it gets ganked early, to be the strongest land power in the game because trade companies were that strong. The final patch notes. Oh boy, the final patch notes. Yeah, those are gonna make me cry. But all the values, disclaimer can be still changed by paradox, whatever. So I think with these trade companies, this is a much better game because trade companies were too strong. Now everyone is just going to state everything except Great Britain and Portugal that are going to like trade company a select amount of things. Where's the best EU4 and why is it you? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me, Big Fish. All right. So yes, trade company is still a concept in the game, not completely irrelevant, but mostly irrelevant. And the fact that Europe can be trade company, etc., like that has no real impact. You're never gonna have an India like trade company part of Europe to then collect there. Like that just does. Like the reason why there would still be space for trade companies is because of how trade propagation works and because of the directional flow of trade. But so the idea of trade companies in multiplayer in Europe for Asia or Africa, that's a non-thing. That's just a non-thing. And fuck this, I got a life. Then why are you watching my podcast? The Utomate EU4 MP Nerd podcast. Pigcast even. It's not even a podcast. Fucking Pigcast, dear gods. Okay, let's see. Blah, blah, blah. What else is there? Yeah, random conditions, whatever. Okay. So that's this change. Let's go to the second change. We're going to keep this one, the most juicy one, for the last one. And we're going to go with the land warfare, the 3 new types of manufactories that they added to the game. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy, new manufactories. Okay. Now, why did I say that this is positive? Okay. I'd say I agree with Cookie overall. It adds a little bit of decision making, which is in what cases do you make these one of these three, and in what cases do you make the regular manufacturing? And so you have to always ask yourself, what's the value of money versus the value of manpower? And most of the time, of course, I answer all the time to like an excessive degree. I tell you, it's all about manpower. You want your army strength to be as high as possible. So if we're going to go with that logic, we're just going to build this on every single province, and we're going to fab to our like 60k manpower recovery like countries. But of course, there is like a point of balance between your country's income and your country's manpower, and so you have to think about the value, the respective value of these. When do you build the manpower? When do you build the thing? The problem, kinda, is that this sort of gives you the answer, right? This sort of answers the question for you. So, like, it gives you the question, but the answer is a bit too obvious for it. Okay, let's talk about individually. This first one. Ramparts, plus 1/4 level, 15% local defensiveness. This one is terrible. This one is terrible. If people know me and my view on for vanilla and the mod and MB, I hate forts. I think forts are completely overpowered. I think forts are perhaps the worst thing about the game. You can have a level 9, you can have a level 10 mountain fort if you want. So you have this on mountains, like have fun assaulting it. Already mountains are completely broken in the game. And now on top of this, you're going to make it even harder to assault. Yeah, imagine Tyrol, for example, right? Let me do a side rant. Okay, let me do a side rant. People who unironically put their capital on Tyrol, that's fucking horrible. Terrible. Don't ever fucking do that. Alright? Okay, so why? Because you can't waste the admin power early on, and you don't want to be deving your capital early on. Want to dev your capital later once you have a lot of dev. Okay. Whereas you have to dev your gold mine straight at the start of the game. Okay, so don't fucking waste your admin mana by switching your capital to turn. Okay, but you always see every fucking game, you see these nerds who have their capital on Tyrol and it triggers me. Okay. But this is just cancer, okay? Forts, bad. This, more forts and unassaultable forts. Like, assaulting, like, if you've ever tried assaulting, like, the Persian mountains, it's just horrible. It's just horrible. And this makes it even worse. So, like, now you see a mountain. Like, it's already at the stage of the game where you're playing MP multiplayer, like, or EU4 multiplayer. You're looking at the map, and you see these Italian mountains, or you see Persia, and your brain is just like, we should take over this land. Because, wow, look at the trade. Look at, like, well, mostly look at the trade, right? It's like, oh, I can kill this player. This player is very strong, can threaten me. I should kill him, right? But then you look at the mountains, and you're just thinking, well, I have to take a -2 battle, so that's not happening. A defensive -2 battle, guaranteed defensive -2 battle. And then on top of it, if I assault it, I'm going to take just absurd casualties. And it's going to take too long as well. And, like, I've often, like, if you've ever tried, there was this one game where I was subbing Netherlands. It was the TTT game. I was subbing Netherlands, and I was assaulting the Italian mountains. So there was an actual Italy with defensiveness. I think it's like something ridiculous, like 33% defensiveness. And I tried to assault a mountain. Literally 160k troops just died in like 2 days on the fucking mountain. So this is like the kind of nightmare scenario that I'm seeing all over again. So just get that shit out of here. So this is bad. This is really bad. We don't want more forts. We don't want more defensiveness, local defensiveness. No, never build this. Are you going to build this? Yes, absolutely. You're 100% building this manufacturer. This manufactory is 100% worth building on those key forts. So this one is a no-brainer. You build it. It's good. It's very good. Okay, then there's this one. Is this one good? Yes, this one is very good. 250 local sailors. That's an insane amount of sailors for like per development. Like how much? Like it's like 10 sailors per one development. So this is insane amount of developments, and double if on sold fish, naval supplies, or tropical woods, you're building it on fish, right? Like the way I see this thing is, if you have a couple of these bad boys on a couple of fish provinces, which are the worst trade value from all of these, and really low, like it's almost the worst trade value like good in the whole game, the fish. If you just have a couple of these on your fish and you make the sailor modifier building on those provinces, you're done. You've solved your sailor problem. Like now you have enough sailors for your empire. All right. And so you can forget about every other sailor. You can forget about things. You're effectively eliminating the sailor mechanic from the game. And so you can argue that this is good. If you think sailors are a bad mechanic, good. There you go. You have enough sailors. There you go. You solved the sailor problem. There's no more. Yeah, there's the Marines issue. There's the Marines issue. Okay. There's the Marines issue. But of course, sailors is not. I will say that the naval. When we discuss sailors, we do have to discuss it in the context of the naval changes and our prediction of the naval. The impact of the introduction of the naval mechanic that they've made on naval warfare. And hint, I don't think that the impact of the modifier that they added to the game is sufficient to fundamentally change the way naval warfare works, and thus how the importance of sailors. All right. So I think we're like some countries are gonna build some of these on their fish. They're gonna make a thing, and that's gonna be it, right? Okay. Moving on. This guy though. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh no, we're losing our minds here. Okay. 750 local manpower. Is that a lot? Yes, that's a lot. That's 3 base manpower. But you have to always think about manpowers. You have to always consider that it multiplies with a lot of things, right? If you try to think about how much manpower modifiers and manpower recovery modifiers are in the game, a lot of them. There are a lot of them. Yes, sir. So first of all, there's 100% from your racks building. Then there's 50% from quantity. Then there's 25 from the edict. Then there's what else is there? There's like your government reform for 15%. If you have a specific government, you have more. Most countries are going to have. Yeah, they don't scale with Diplo. They stay with overall dev. So you need like 25 dev on the province to have as much like base dev as imprisonment offices, right? So that's like a lot, right? 25 dev, that's a lot. So imagine 25 dev, like that, like so 100% of your dev is as if you have a. If we compare this to this, it's like this sets plus 2,500 manpower. That's like relatively speaking, like per percentage efficiency of a province, right? Oh, it's 30 per day. Oh my god, I'm so stupid. Well, you see how much I know about fucking sailors. Okay, well it's still a fucking lot. Okay, it's still okay. No, but that's much more reasonable. All right, fine. Okay, then whoever, fuck this building then. All right. All right. I'm gonna talk in depth about the naval changes, and I do think I have my good share to say. But I will say that I've never played. Like, I lack practical experience. So about sailors, I don't actually know much about sailors. How relevant or not relevant the sailors are themselves. Okay. So I was listing the bonuses. Long story short about the bonuses, if you stack everything up, all the bonuses you have, and all the manpower recovery bonuses you have, roughly speaking, this is going to be 4 times the amount. So every nerd building here is going to give you 3,000 manpower, and all of these are going to give you 6,000 manpower. And if you are playing Russia, it's even fucking more, and it's like godly amounts because you got the Russian IDs, the Tsardom, and the serfdom government. Sailors irrelevant going naval build. That's the impression I did have. But right, my idea is like if naval warfare changes sufficiently, then other countries than Great Britain and Portugal are gonna be going navy, maybe, right? And so for them, sailors is actually a relevant mechanic, perhaps. Okay, but all that I'm gonna discuss in the other thing. So anyway, this is a lot of manpower. When I was like stressing when I made the university building in EU4 and give like one base manpower because I thought already, oh my god, this is a lot of manpower. This is a lot of manpower. This is a lot of manpower. Are you building it on grains, fish, livestock, and wine? I think the answer is you're building this on grain, you're building this on fish, and you're building this on wine. Livestock actually gives pretty good late game, right? It's like 3.4 or like even more. It's 3.4 at some point, definitely. So that's actually pretty decent trade value late game. And like, if you lose all the income from all the manufacturers from all these provinces, so there is a question whether or not you're going to build them on the livestock. You're 100% building them on the grain, on the fish, and on the wine. And I think the consequence of that is that you're 100% no. I mean, you're also giving this to the nobility. All of these provinces are giving to the nobility. If you didn't do that already, you already did that. With trade ID as your sixth IDs and less mercs, or even no mercs at all, there's less of a need for money. So maybe you're actually just building this on every province, right? That might just be the case. That now you just build this on every single province. That might be the case. But maybe not, right? Okay, 1.3 vanilla, you're building this on all of these provinces. All of these trade goods, you're building this. Now, I've convinced myself 100% you're building this on all the things. And you're probably not building them on others. Depending on how rich you are. On more, and depends on how rich you are. But you're definitely building them on all of these. You're giving them to nobility. And now the consequence is you're probably not building a production building on these. So you're not going to be deving the Diplo on these. You're going to dev the base tax. So actually, it's a small buff to base tax because there's more provinces on which you want the base tax. Because you're not going to build a manufactory on them, thus really nerfing the value of the production. The production building costs too much either way, the second tier of it. Yeah, like the meta is definitely going to be full manpower builds. They're going far over your force limit before waging. Like, we're still going to find a way to bankrupt, right? Like, I'm looking at the changes and I'm thinking, well, we're not going to bankrupt. But they also said they would buff manpower. Oh my god, they're going to buff manpower. Okay, actually, I said it's like 3 base manpower, but it might just be like 1 base manpower, 2 base manpower, depending on how much they buff manpower, right? It might just be that they're like 500 manpower, base manpower per death. Probably not. Like, if they did that, it would be very bad for the game, because then we would reach like astronomical numbers of units. But no, okay, so yeah, you're just gonna build these. These look good. We're gonna build these. We're gonna build a lot of these, probably on more than just these provinces, given the how we see 1.3 is gonna probably look like, and it's going to be a lot of manpower added. So let's just think about this. Like, if a regular country has, if you build this in 50% of your provinces, and those provinces happen to have nobility, like half of those have nobility estates, and they are 11 base manpower. I think that's like roughly correct. I mean, so that's 3/8 plus or something. Yeah, we're probably looking at a we're probably looking at a why am I so bad? We're probably looking at 1/5 of manpower increase just from that, just from this building. 1/5 more manpower. So now we're looking at, like, a good country should have 25k manpower recovery, and Russia should have 40k to 45k. Probably. You think manpower buffs are going to make conscription center less important? No, because they're going to be less important. Big fish, yes, because if mercs are not good, then of course force limit is less good as well. But force limit is still like the best way, your best economic modifier to delay bankruptcy, right? If you think about how much money you're making with a manufactory with a production thing on it, depends on the trade goods, and it depends on the percentage of how much like trade steering goes on that trade value and how much of the end result you end up collecting. But like just one force limit, it's a lot of money that you save per month because of how Pepega, like the reinforcement costs with over force limit costs, all stack up, maintenance costs and stuff. So you're still gonna make the force limit building just to delay bankruptcy and also have like your peacetime strength be sufficiently high. You're not building menus, yeah, and you're not building menus as well, right? But no. So, but my point of comparison is saying you're comparing the economic value of a fort, like the force limit buildings. Is not just a good military modifier; it's also an insanely good eco modifier. So we're still going to build those. They're still one of the hard lock buildings. Um, is it going to be built before the manpower building? I probably still yes, right? Probably still yes. We're probably not gonna like. It's not like the other estates are gonna. Like, I don't think mercs are gonna be completely irrelevant. We're still gonna care a little bit, surely. Coffee's giving to the Marafas. I'm not ignoring your thing. What did you even say, Dux? Like I didn't see it. Drugs here. Sure, you know a lot about fucking sailors. All right. Okay, and you didn't say it. Probably someone deleted your. You can assign estates to provinces. Yeah, that's actually annoying, right? That's actually quite a bad change because provinces are not fixed in terms of their trade goods. That removes a bit of like the micro you can do. I actually like estates in the current implementation. Of estates. Anyway, we've dallied on long enough. Like I've been ranting for so long on this, and this is still like small potatoes. There's some other changes here. There's like the drilling change. Now drilling is 25% reduction. Is that good? Yes, that's good. That's good. We're getting that bonus, right? Especially if we have excess money. If we have excess money, then we're getting this, right? That's a lot. 100% we're getting this. Does that mean we're gonna keep AP somehow? No, no. We're still refunding AP at the start of the war and getting your manpower at the start of the serious war. So, are you gonna try to get it? If you have more money, you're also gonna just be drilling more. Drilling more, you're gonna have AP. Are you gonna get that full minus 50% when full? No, no. And of course, you're recruiting. Oh well, actually, what am I saying? Like, uh, how does recruiting the new mercs affect army professionals? We don't know that, right? So it might not affect army professionals, but then what reduces army professionals? Does anyone know? Did they talk about that? About how current merc rework interacts with AP? Anyway, like if this change was made in 1.28, like mercs are the same, and we make this change, then yes, we're drilling. No, we're not. We're not. We're still gonna refund army professionalism before the big war. All right. Yeah, of course, slackens reduce army professionalism, but like if you don't have to slacken, you could theoretically, if you don't recruit mercs, just be 100% all the time. Imperatory cost, which is basically professionalism, these are similar to imperator. Yeah, okay, so there's still gonna be the same system. It's gonna be like a flat amount, like 5 or 10 or something. Well, if that's the case, like then clearly you're better off just slackening for manpower, for your own manpower, than to get the bad mercs, right? In the current version, you want the mercs because the mercs are super manpower, but now like you're just gonna get your own manpower and be happy with it. Okay, but are we drilling? Yes, we're gonna drill. 100% we're gonna drill because that's a big buff. And remember, even if you lose it, because you're just losing it in the battle, I mean, if this buff makes you win 2 offensive battles in the late game, that can be a 1 war. That can be a 1 war. So we're doing it. 100%. It's also cheaper if you think about it. What is more expensive, to drill these units to 100% or to go over your force limit another like 50% of your force limit to win the battle that you would have won with the drill bonus? And the answer is probably drilling is well, actually drilling might be more expensive but the thing is that it's like in a burst of area that you can. It's like the amount that you can spend in the all-out war is just limited by your loans and not really by like how much money. Okay, so I'm stop ranting on this. Yes, you drill. Let's go to the real change. All right, the one everyone is excited for. Boggies, let's go. I want to see some yeehaws in the chat. The naval warfare equations. Okay, so there's two things. First of all, drop of information. Oh my god, we know how naval warfare works now? Not exactly. And they made a little change. So we're going to start with just reading how naval warfare supposedly goes in 1.3. You're not excited for this one. Yeah. Actually, drilling 2 million troops. It's just impossible, but yeah, you'll have to be drilling. Well, alright, Jarvin disagrees with me. I think we're going to be drilling. At least a little bit. At least, like, we're not going to drill necessarily the 2 million men, that's right. But I think we're going to use the generals that we do have to drill, right? That much, I do think. So we're going to drill at least some of our guys. I mean, though there still has the casualty, like, chance per drilling for your general, so that's still really, really bad. That really needs to be removed from the game. Like, you cannot have these drilling accidents. Like, EU4 removed that from drilling because that's just so bad. Like, you kill your general. Having a general is worth a lot. Okay. So the first thing is they deploy your units to a certain combat width, whatever your combat width happens to be. First you get your heavies, then gals. Alright, all of this we pretty much knew. Good. Alright. Then this is like kind of weird. Kind of weird, right? Kind of weird. I mean, in order to stop drilling, you literally just window over your stacks and you press J, right? That's all you gotta do. It's not difficult, Jar Jar. Okay, now one thing I need to say before we talk about this is that this is just a description of functions, right? It's not the functions themselves, first of all. And even had they been the functions that some of them are like kind of functiony, but even if we had the algorithms, all right, even if we had the algorithms, we have a lot of precedents today, again, of developers and PDX developers, but also developers in other games who supposedly give you their equations or their numbers and values or like their code or try to describe their code and end up giving you something that is, I won't say incorrect, but I'm going to say imprecise and incomplete. All right. So I would say this is not necessarily like gospel that we can be like, oh yes, 100% this is correct. So I put that disclaimer out there. We're going to, of course, pretend like it is gospel and we just analyze it. Okay. Now there's this line. If previous target is about to die, set previous target to null. Like that's kind of weird. So I'm guessing if like the boat is about to die, you stop targeting it. The way I understand the system is that once a boat starts getting low, right, starts getting low moral, it gets a sort of pseudo untargetability. It gets very unlikely to get targeted. Right? You can see there's like base chance of picking. This is the targeting system explained. We finally have an explanation for this targeting system, at least a little bit. All right. And as soon as moral is 0 or below, now you're like, moral can be below 0, but okay, I guess that's irrelevant. Reduced chance to be picked by a tenfold. So this is very significant. Once moral is 0 below, it's 0 or below, says Grugi. In the discussion I had with Grugi when I asked for clarification, he actually said it's like chips get less likely to get targeted as soon as they hit 0.5 or below. But this is actually very impactful. If damage is less than 50, reduced chance to be picked, increased chance to be picked by ×2. So you're actually getting likely to be targeted once you get damaged, once your moral gets sufficiently low. But then again, it says damage less than. Oh no. Okay, it's hull damage is less than 50. Okay, so you're very likely to get targeted when you're high hull, and you're very unlikely to get targeted when you're low moral. Okay, we got it. We got it. Wait, wait a second. Now, now I understand. Grugy, he kept talking about base casualties, but he was talking about naval. He was talking about naval. Base damage is 0. That's the naval equation he was talking about. That's the naval equation he just gave us. Is the naval equation. Like Grugy talked a lot today, like about I asked him questions like about base casualty and to make it moddable, and he was like, "Wow, but this is the mod. This is the like." Jordan and me were trying to understand what he was talking about, and Doc think he figured out what he was talking about. But this is what he was talking about, unless it's the same equation as our land warfare, right? Unless it's the same equation as a land warfare to some extent, which I suppose is possible. It's possible the base damage modifier, like equation of land and naval warfare, are actually the same. Okay, it's actually possible. So I'm not gonna like say it's that he was talking nonsense. It might be the case. Okay. Then this is then the specific. So this would be the same as land warfare, and this would be the specific follow up for damage. I will assume physical or hull damage in that case, right? Target hull, yeah, hull damage. Blah blah blah, blah blah blah. All right, fine. So now we have an equation. We're gonna write that in the wiki, by the way. Someone has to get on that. We're gonna try to figure this out. We can test this and stuff. People who care about naval can. Yeah, and then there's moral damage. Okay. So yeah, okay, it's the same base. Okay, so probably it's the same base one as land warfare, and then there's a specific one for hull damage and a specific one for moral damage for ships, just like for land warfare. All right. So once a ship gets to 0 moral, it becomes pseudo untargetable, very unlikely to target. However, if it does get targeted, it multiplies. Wait. Here we go. If ship moral 0 or below, multiply damage by 10. Now, I understand multiply damage by 10. We're talking about this damage, so hull damage, which is something that we have noticed in the past, which is once a ship reaches 0 naval moral, it gets sunk really quickly. It gets sunk really quickly because the next hit is like, it takes like 2% hull damage, 2%, and then suddenly it has 0%. Naval moral has like 60%, roughly speaking, or 67, roughly speaking, of hull. And then suddenly the day afterwards, it's either dead or it has like 20% hull strength. And so it sinks instantly. Okay. Or very quickly, right? If it gets hit. The thing is, it's not likely to get it hit. But if it does get hit, it's going to sink. All right. So all of this, actually, Grugy said, most of this already exists. This we know already existed. Grugy said that this this already existed before. So what has changed then? Now, I actually don't think that this existed before. But I've not done naval testing in a long time. I know for sure that this did not exist before the Mare Nostrum update. So maybe it was added in the Mare Nostrum updates. Is Novel Combat good or no? Okay, that's gonna be a difficult question to answer. The answer is gonna be no. The answer is no. The answer is yeah. It depends on how much on the values that they add to it. Okay, so what did they actually change? What they actually changed is that they added a modifier. Where is it? They added blockades, that's irrelevant. They added this modifier here. Ship disengagement chance, which is a base of 3%, which means that once such ship reaches 0.5 moral, it's going to start to roll to disengage. 3% chance. So it needs, on average, 33. Yeah, here, base value is 3%. Of course, that's still up for grabs. It means, on average, 33 days after your ship hit 0.5 naval moral is going to need to disengage. So it stays in the fight for 33 days on average after hitting 0.5 moral. Now, if we look at the equation, Grugy said in Discord that this effect applied when moral is 0.5 or below, which made a lot more sense. But now here it's written 0 below. So it's still going to get targeted at 0.5. So basically the next day, if it gets targeted, it's going to be at 0 moral or at like 0.1 moral. So in 2 days, it's going to be at 0 moral. Then it's no longer going to get targeted. And Grugy confirmed, which is extremely important, like absolutely insanely important, which is something I asked him, is, okay, well, if a boat is in the fight but has no naval moral, does it, but is still engaged, does it or not shoot? And he said, no, if a boat has 0 naval moral, it does not fire. That means it's disabled. So the way I understand it is that the boat, if it hits 0 moral, is still in the fight and is disabled, and thus is not sinking and is clogging up the fight. Why is it clogging the fight? It's clogging up the fight because it's not sinking. It's clogging up the fight because it's not sinking. It's not sinking because it's not getting targeted. Right? So this is the actual problem with naval warfare. It's right here, in a sense. Right? Now, the way they try to solve it is by saying, we're going to add a ship disengagement chance. But it's so minor that it's not a likely outcome at all for a ship to disengage. There's 3 outcomes for a ship. Right? Either one, it gets targeted, despite being not a high targeted. It gets targeted despite not being a high targeted. Wait a second here. But it's not a high target priority, but it still gets targeted just randomly. And thus it sinks because it's very low moral and it's going to take massive amount of hull damage and it sinks. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is all your ships drop, like none of your ships that are at low moral get targeted, but eventually they stay in the fight and they don't disengage. And eventually all your ships are low moral and they all sink at the same time. Right? That's option number 2. And option number 3 is your ship successfully manages to disengage. But because it's 3%, you need an average 33 days to disengage. The first and second option just appear much more likely statistically because you don't need 33 days to get ships to go to 0 moral, right? It takes like 15 days maybe, or less even, right? Less even. So what is going to happen is ships are still going to clog up the thing. They're not going to sink. They're just going to stand there. And what's going to happen is either they're going to sink or they are going to just sink all at the same time. They're just going to stand there, not deal damage because they're disabled because they don't have moral. And they're just going to sink. So is the problem solved? Is the problem that this buck supposedly that's making naval moral the dominant power in the dominant naval quality modifier, is this fixed? No, this does not appear to be fixed. This disengage chance is not sufficient to fix that issue. And of course, the issue of the naval warfare, like the naval moral bug that we call, where the ships are clogging, disabled ships are clogging your naval combat with. All right, like this is only part of the enormous amount of things that make naval warfare bad in MP, right? Like this is only the cherry, like on top of the thing. A lot of people focus and say this is the reason why naval is bad or navies are bad in EU4 MP, but no, this is like tiny amounts. All right, so this does not appear to fix it. Now, here's what I'm going to add. Do I understand why this modifier is low? The answer is yes. Because imagine if this modifier was 50%. Right? Let's just hypothetically say this modifier is 50% or 30%. What happens? As soon as your ship hits 0.5 moral, is out of the fight. So the likely scenario, if with a 50% chance of going away, is that ships don't get sunk. Very little ships get sunk, right? Very, very little ships get sunk. If you never sink your enemy's ships, then what does naval warfare turn into? That means that you're just sending your fleet, your opponent's sending your fleet, all right? Naval warfare doesn't, like, naval moral doesn't really matter, or actually naval warfare matters. Naval warfare is still going to help you win the fight, but after the fight, you haven't sunk anything of your enemy, and your enemy hasn't sunk anything of you, because things just disengage. And then eventually, naval warfare just turns into a grind fest, a sailor grind fest. Whoever has most sailors, coupled with like the best value of a sailor's respect, is relative, obviously, to like the overall amount of naval modifiers that you happen to have, naval quality modifiers that you happen to have. But whoever has the most relative sailor worth ends up winning, because ships just don't get sunk. Right, so after your navy it goes back to repair. You just wait a couple of months. You send it back out. Bam, there's another fight. Eventually, there's no more sailors for one side, and that side has lost the naval warfare. So I understand why this modifier can't be too high, right? Because then that's not a very appealing scenario. All right, so let's think about the consequences of all of this on naval warfare and on the value of respective naval modifiers. Is with this value, is naval moral still the single most important naval modifier in the game? 100%, because naval warfare just works the same way still. The point is to disable your enemy ships, which they still are, so that they can fire. And then eventually you're going to sink them. You're still going to sink your enemy's naval. True naval. Like, it's not, you don't sink your enemies by hull damage. You actually sink your enemies by putting their naval moral to 0, which, one, disables them, and number 2, makes them take 10 times as much damage once they get targeted. Right? And so either they're going to get targeted one by one, unlikely, or they're all going to die at the same time, roughly speaking. Right? And once you kill your enemy by reducing their naval moral to 0, then you deal naval moral to all the other ships that are currently in the batch. All right? It's not like you can prevent that, because you have to, else you lose the battle. You have to send in your troops after the initial fight. You have to send in your troops, so they're always going to reinforce. Like, you reinforce with only like one group of frontline. But you're still going to lose. Those are going to take a moral hit from losing all those ships, right? And there's not enough that are going to disengage, right? Maybe one ship disengages or something per like combat with, right? So moral is still the absolute king with this change of all naval warfare. So this changes nothing. Now, what are the real problems that need to be fixed besides this this problem? Because this, we could just increase this chance to like 20%, and maybe that would be fine, and maybe then it would be much better. But actually, I would like what is this? Like, what is, like, why is this a thing? Like this one? Like, why is this? What is that? Get that shit out of here! Like this equation. Why is this good for naval warfare? Why is this a thing? Why does this exist? Because otherwise you never sink ships. Okay, because otherwise you can never sink ships, because like the difference between moral damage and hull damage is too low. So I think if you, hey boy, Jarvan, stay with me. I think if you want to solve this, like, let's try to be constructive. You want to solve this, for naval warfare to work, like it needs to be possible to sink a ship with hull damage before it is before ship moral reaches 0. Otherwise, you're always going to have a problem. It's not like land warfare, where you can just remove, like, where you, like, it's not an issue that moral is always going to be the first determining factor of why something goes away. So you need to like rebalance this. The hull damage needs to be higher, and then we can forget about this equation. We can forget about this equation. We can simplify this entire process. We can have much better battles where other modifiers are impactful. All right. But of course, the main problem of EU4 naval warfare is, number one, that it's too costly for land powers to build a navy, that is not interesting for them, that naval warfare is completely one-sided, and that quality is the like determining factor. In fact, Grugy says it himself. At some point, it's like, if one side picks naval, the other side doesn't. It's foregone conclusion. Okay, first of all, naval IDs should not be a thing. And if they are a thing, they certainly should not have this many like naval modifiers in them. If you look at naval IDs, it's utterly ridiculous how good that is. It's absolutely, that needs to be nerfed. All right, but actually, it just should be removed because it doesn't add anything meaningful to the game. You just remove it, and you already fixed a lot of the naval issues. All right. And then something is like, if you have a better navy, you should win. But result of those combats were so skewed that something has to be wrong. Okay. And so this is the other issue, which is quantity does not matter in naval warfare. People have abandoned the FMH. There's so much hype before. Now that I'm ranting about navies, no one cares. Right? So quantity does not matter. Does this change affect that? No. Like, quality is still going to outperform massively quantity, isn't it? Because you're still sinking all the ships all the time, so sailors are not going to be meaningful. In fact, with the sailor change to manufacturer, you're making sailors even less meaningful. So as long as your initial ships are able to win the fight, like, this is still like the way to go. So you really need, in order to make naval game more interesting, you need to equalize this somewhat. Get rid of these like ridiculous modifiers that don't make any sense. You need to increase this chance to be significantly higher, to like 20%, 30%. Maybe that's too high, but 3% is definitely too low. You need to remove naval IDs from the game, like for multiplayer. Definitely cannot exist in multiplayer. And then, of course, you need to nerf Great Britain. But that's like a completely different thing. That's not what I said. Fucking so that's absolutely not what I said. Like, I'm the only mod who actually tries to address naval warfare, and like, you need to make a lot of changes to it for it to happen. And this is not enough, right? This is definitely not enough. In fact, this is almost irrelevant. Almost irrelevant. Well, actually, just irrelevant. That's what I think right now. This irrelevant. Okay. And then that's pretty much it for the podcast. The rest is like, worst blockades. Who cares? Remove naval IDs doesn't imply that. No, naval IDs has nothing to do with whether or not naval combat exists or is a fun part of the game. Naval IDs as a concept fundamentally breaks the naval warfare. It's the absolute worst part, and like the main part why navies can't exist. Good Death Diary just keeps holding me. What you want the you want the this one. You like this here, Puffy. You like this, huh? Look, but this is irrelevant. Like, this, like, for us MP modders, it's irrelevant. We see this. If this makes it in the game, we just nerf the values, right? Like, what does it matter? It doesn't matter. Like, and it's like a Japanese theocracy. Like, what is that? Like, do you even get the independent demo bonuses? Because if you don't get the independent demo bonuses, is it actually good? No, probably not. Have I already given my opinion on Marines? No, I've not. Marines are like, we'll see what was up with them. Oh, wait. If you're talking about the real me, this stuff here, right? The blockade, force required, and 100% hostile disembark time plus hostile fleet attrition. Yeah, that's pretty memey right there. All right, that's I don't know what to say about that. I don't know how you can like look at the game and think that somehow this building is like, yeah. This one is like irrelevant. It's annoying, but you're not gonna build that on every tile you have. But maybe on sometimes, like in Japan, there might be some tiles you want this one on. But this one is actually, you're building that one in every sea tile. You're gonna have one of these bad boys, because oh my god, that just kills the fleet. That just kills the fleet. Anyway. They're a must build on coastal province. Yeah, but you only need one per like things, right? The way I understand it, as long as there's one province that has this in your like area, then you take a shit ton of hostile fleet attrition. So by the time that you're landing, your ships are dead, kinda. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but they're taking like 15% attrition, and then you go in with your own fleet. Hmm. But yeah, like I don't know, like who cares? Like in MP, we'll just remove these buildings, right? Like it doesn't matter. This stuff actually like matters because this stuff we're likely not to be able to change it, right? We might be able to change this percentage modifier, but might not be able to. But this we can't. We're not going to be able to change, and this is what needs to be changed fundamentally, as well as Great Britain and stuff. But those are things that we can actually change, right? Rest of stuff, who cares? All irrelevant. I was even bored reading it. It's like, I mean, this this is a pretty good like war scores 30%. Like that's good. That's good. Like it's good. Like yeah, yeah. Okay. But anyway, thanks for tuning. Maybe you guys still have a couple of questions or comments or something. Right, you can change the modifier because Portugal. So yeah, at worst, if we can't change the base value, we can give every other nation the modifier itself. So you're wrong. Oh yeah, you're right. First things. Okay, we can change it. Right. We'll have to like theory craft about like what the ideal number is. But as I said, it can't be too high because if it's too high, then every ship is just gonna retreat, and then it just becomes a sailor grindfest. And the difference, like you can say, but is on land for warfare also just a manpower grindfest? Yes, but there's much more like skill involved in manpower management than there is in sailor management, the way I see it. Okay, right. But drugs. The new horde reform is super pog plus 2 horde unit. Hordes. Fucking hordes in vanilla. There's the shit. So overall conclusion, was my conclusion right? Is the game going to be better? Yes. Even though it's almost irrelevant, does this make the game better? Yes, this does make the game better. It's not a very high bar. Does the stage thing make the game better? Yes. Is it interesting though? Like, is this? Here's the other question: is this better than the current state mechanic? Yes. But is having this penalty? If I'm a modder, is having this penalty, hey guys, short? Is it good for the game? Does it meaningfully add to the game? And I would say the answer is no. Because like how do you interact with this? Like you're just gonna state everything. There's never any moment where you can think, oh, I'm not gonna state this because these modifiers are bad. And it's not really gonna make you build courthouses. And even if you did make you build courthouses, how's that interesting or strategic in any kind of way? So I would say from a modding perspective, just remove it. Just remove the concept of states. I would say not remove the concept of states because the real value of states existing is that you can you can tweak your estate loyalty a little bit, and you can only have core provinces for a certain while. So that has value. But apart from that, states don't really have like this mechanic. It doesn't add anything to the game, and this for MP is pointless. It's not interesting. But it's still better than what we have. It's not interesting, but still better than what we have. And then the TCs, that's a big improvement over the game. Very big nerf, very warranted. And then what was the buildings? The buildings, okay, whatever. This one, horrible. I'm gonna remove that one from my mod. If we go to 1.3, but this one, I kind of like. I kind of like. It might be like might need to nerf it with overall manpower levels. Make it like 500 and like not double this, like, or just remove this maybe, because this is not actually very like why this is already where you would build them. Like, why is there a hard synergy? There's already soft synergy because these are the worst trade goods with like, yeah, these are the worst. So like, why is there the hard synergy when there's already soft synergy, right? That seems kind of silly. But still better. The game would still be better with the introduction of this thing, as long as we reduce the number of total numbers. Oh my god. Yeah, that's what. Well, no, because this one is never gonna matter, drugs, right? The current implementation of this mechanic with the courthouses, this is never gonna matter. And if the only thing is, oh, I need to build a couple of courthouses here and there, like 6 courthouses in my empire, or 10 courthouses, or 20 courthouses, to prevent from this really, if this was really, really bad, let's say it said minus 50 discipline for some reason, I mean, it would not be interesting. You would need to build courthouses, but that would not be an interesting mechanic. All right. Well, yeah, but you're not going to end up with minus 30 efficiency. If it is just like I say, even if it's impactful, does not make it meaningful or interesting. Okay. All right. I've ranted like way too long. Well, hopefully you guys are happy about it. You guys been asking me for a long, long time. Talk about it. So yeah. All right. Thanks for tuning in, nerds, and see you another time. Now that I'm no longer hosting MGL, I can actually stream. Imagine that.